Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to part 3 of me reading the Heritage Foundation's 7 top objectives so that you don't have to. Today, we're going to be talking about their third objective, ensuring free and fair elections. Now, get your eyes ready to roll because, of course, this is coming from the party that did kind of go crazy and throw a riot on January 6th because they didn't win. This is another brief section, but one thing you're going to recognize as we go on here is that a lot of the things that they're talking about, we've already seen some evidence that this is already in implementation in a way. During the news cycle this year, we saw drop-off ballot boxes getting bombed, exploded. We saw that people were challenging the voter rolls, trying to find these people they said were fraudulent voters or who might be trafficking their votes. We saw a lot of challenges and a lot of talk about people registering illegal immigrants and talk about how you should need like more identification to prove that you're a citizen of the country. So as I'm reading this, keep in mind everything you've seen in the news cycle regarding voting during this election, because it's going to start to sound very familiar. But anyways, let's get right into the introduction. The introduction says, the right to vote in a free and fair election is one of the most basic civil rights and is fundamental to maintaining a democratic republic. Americans can have confidence in election outcomes only if they can trust that the process is fair and honest. Legitimate voters should be able to vote in privacy without being harassed, secure in the knowledge that their vote will not be lost, stolen, altered, or negated by fraud, mistakes, and errors, or a vote cast by an ineligible individual such as a non-citizen or a felon. Heritage will increase faith in elections and protect the right to vote for all Americans by advocating for common sense reforms in the state, such as requiring voter ID, cleaning up inaccurate voter rolls, and ending the practice of vote trafficking of absentee ballots. And we will always oppose a federal takeover of our elections by Washington, D.C. elites. They go on here to say something about the federal bureaucracy and the left trying to consolidate power over elections using the federal government. And honestly, I really have no idea what they're talking about unless they're talking about like the election denial stuff, because there has really been no effort for the federal government to take over your right to vote. Up here, they start getting into what they're going to do. We already know about litigating election challenges. I mean, we've been watching this go through the courts all year. But the rest of it is really where we start to get into what's a little bit more problematic in this section. They say that redistricting is a problem, and yeah, it is. Gerrymandering has always been a problem for districts. That's why when you look at certain maps of counties and election precincts, instead of seeing these nice clean lines around the county in question, a lot of the time you'll see all these weird zigzags and loops and stuff. That's because they're trying to get certain districts. Like if they have a little pocket that's heavily Republican or heavily Democrat, they'll try to draw the line around that district so that those voters get put in a different voter district altogether, and they can take certain voter districts over through where they draw the lines on the map. But that's been a problem for many, many years. This isn't new. This isn't like some attack from the left. Gerrymandering has been historically an issue. And then the next part they start talking about is absentee balloting and vote trafficking. Now, they list them kind of separately here, but in the intro, you heard them say language that linked these two, absentee balloting and vote trafficking. Basically, what the allegation is here is that by having absentee ballots, by having drop-off boxes, by having these ways that makes it more accessible for more people to vote, that it's easier to fake a ballot. But really, there are some protection measures on there already. Like when you sign the back of your absentee ballot and you put it in a drop box, you have to have that signature relatively match how your signature looks on your ID. That's something they check. There are precautions, and we've found very, very few cases that there was any type of fraud, that there was any type of wrongdoing with absentee ballots. Can it happen? Sure. Is it happening? We don't have the evidence to say that. But perhaps the scariest part of this section is the idea of requiring more voter ID. So Why is this scary? Well, to me, it really reminds me of the poll tax, where you had to go and you had to pay to cast a ballot. If we're getting stricter and stricter about voter ID requirements and say needing to have two forms of picture ID to vote, well, that is meaning that your driver's license alone might not be sufficient if they really decide to go that route of requiring two forms of ID. And that's an idea we have heard tossed out there. To get a second picture ID, what a lot of people are going to have to do is get a passport. And those aren't cheap. I mean, sure, it's not the most expensive thing in the world, but it is quite more significant than just like paying for your driver's license. When I got my passport recently done, it was $167. So it's basically creating an increased level of income that you would need to have in order to vote, similar to what the poll tax did. It's making sure you are of a certain socioeconomic status if you want to cast a ballot. Once again, we hear about witch hunts that they will push for congressional hearings to expose the left's attempts to undermine our election systems, including actions taken by federal agencies in response to Biden's executive order directing them to become involved in voter registration and other election activities. Really, I haven't heard of the Biden administration doing anything that would prohibit people from voting, only that they would do things to expand access to voting. But regardless, they still want these congressional hearings to happen. Down here, they are basically summarizing a lot of what was said above, but they also add some more information on what kind of policies they're going for on a grander scale. They say they want to restrict private funding in elections, which is interesting because that's one point I would actually agree on. But I don't think they're necessarily talking about the same private funding that I'm talking about. I'm talking about like corporations where under Citizens United, they were able to give massive amounts of money to their chosen candidates and basically fund candidates' elections. But that wouldn't really benefit them. So I'm wondering what they even mean by throwing this little piece in here, because I'm guessing it is not what they think when I say it. I'm guessing they mean more about nonprofits and special interests like Planned Parenthood giving money to a Democratic candidate, for instance. They want to allow election observer access to the polls. That has always happened. Election observers are very common. That's never been an issue. But down here is where it gets a little wonky, because they throw in this part at the end saying, we will continue to defend the Electoral College and block efforts to implement national popular vote and ranked choice voters with our work in the media, in congressional hearings, and in the states. Basically, what they're saying in this last part is the grand scheme of, okay, we want to keep a winner takes all. We want to keep a two-party system because that consolidates power. When you have a national popular vote, it is much, much easier to have like a system in which the Democrats would be more likely to win. It is a lot easier in that to have third parties win with the ranked choice voting, because that gives the ability for more viewpoints to be on the national stage. So really what they're saying here is we want to make sure that there's only two choices, left and right. That way we only have to attack one enemy in order to maintain our power. So that is probably the grandest and most nefarious of these schemes on here. So as you can see, a lot of this, they don't say very much, but with the little bit they're saying a lot. Stay safe, everyone. I'll be back for part 4.